Welcome to Friday Friends, RI Elder Info's weekly look at the organizations and individuals providing resources for Rhode Island seniors, caregivers, and professionals.
Everybody, how are you? Happy Friday. It is 9 o'clock on Friday, and you are watching me, Deb Burton, Executive Director of the nonprofit RI Elder Info, where for almost 6 years I've been bringing you Friday Friends, where we talk about information that you or someone you know needs to know about. Now, I want to let you know that today is part 2 of a conversation that we started with Dr. Patricia Markham Risica a few weeks ago about her healthcare journey as a public health expert. And some of our conversation might be a little sensitive, so I want to make you aware. If you're uncomfortable, please, it's okay to turn away. I understand. But we're having a conversation about some of the things that just don't get talked about very often when it comes to our real life experiences. So it's an important conversation, which is why I'm bringing it to you. And I am very grateful that Patty is willing to share her story. But I also want to make folks aware that it might be a little too raw for some folks. And I just want to acknowledge that up front. Now, as you all know, we could not bring you Friday Friends without the support of our sponsors and our donors. So huge thank you to United Healthcare. Hi, Patty. How are you? Welcome back.
I'm good. Hi, Deb. Nice to see you.
So when you were with us last time, you shared your experience of not feeling well and really having to be a really strong advocate with your doctors in order to find out what was going on. So in case anybody wasn't watching last time, can you just share what was that diagnosis that you had received after much fighting?
Yeah, it took a while for both me and my medical providers to, really get to a point where we understood what was happening. And I don't think that the medical providers were actively fighting against me. I didn't feel like that, but it was really hard to get a sense of urgency going. Can we get this, can I get imaged quickly? And so we really didn't know. So the diagnosis was ovarian cancer, and ovarian cancer is pretty rare. So unfortunately, it's not only rare, there's no screen for it. Like we get mammograms to screen for breast cancer, and men are screened for prostate cancer, and there are a lot of different screening tools that we can use, but not for this one. And which is a whole other science, a whole other thing as to why just imaging everybody doesn't work, and why doing blood tests doesn't work, because they're so non-specific. So anyway, it took a while to find out that I had ovarian cancer, and it was pretty shocking. I mean, I knew there was something wrong, but literally I had lined up some medical evaluation with a GI doctor, gastrointestinal, a GYN. So looking at, gynecologic type of things, and then also with a GU. So is it genitourinary? Is it something with the bladder or in that whole system? And of course, they're all separate from each other. And each one of them I couldn't get in to see for many weeks. But we really didn't know until I had my first imaging that identified there's a big mass, and that it looked like an ovarian tumor.
Oh my goodness. And just for folks who are watching, you kind of know a little bit about public health, right?
Yeah, well, so the irony is I have a master's and a doctorate in public health. Additionally, I have served as the evaluator and epidemiologist for the Rhode Island, used to be called the Women's Cancer Screening Program, but is now called the Breast and Cervical Cancer Screening Program. And so I not only know about public health, I know about screening for gynecologic cancers, and I know about getting screened, and I, get my appointments and so forth. So yeah, this is right up my alley. And unfortunately, I know enough to know, if it's ovarian, that, that's the reason why it took a while, and which is, it's a difficult thing, but this is where we ended the last conversation saying you really have to advocate, and partly because there isn't one thing that's going to tell your doctor this could be ovarian. The symptoms can be really vague and really hard to differentiate, what part of your body is affected.
And with ovarian, it's not something that is picked up on like your annual GYN visit or anything like that?
It is not. And in fact, my husband is also a physician. So he was an immense, and still is, an immense amount of help in asking questions. I mean, he does ear, nose, and throat, so nowhere near that part of the body, but still, he's been to medical school. He knows what questions to ask, and yeah, so it's really hard to tell exactly what's going on. And it was for all of the providers. But the first thing that he said was, well, we should go back and look, because of course I get examined every year. I mean, I don't miss my appointments. And sure, we went back and looked at what the notes were from my appointment. It was October before I was diagnosed, the following late July, really last day of July. So it was quite a few months. And there was nothing there. They found nothing. I don't think I was having any symptoms at that point either. And when we talked to the GYN surgeon about that, I mean, isn't this unusual? She said, no. She said the tumors can grow really fast. And she said that's not that surprising to her, that I would have been clear, had no, nothing to see on the evaluation in October, and had a really large, they said, cantaloupe size tumor by July. Right.
Holy cannoli. And for those who've never actually seen you, you're petite, it's
like, I'm like, where is it?
right. Yeah. And it was interesting because you were leading a very active life. I was living vicariously through you on social media. You were, living a lifelong dream of taking horseback riding lessons and showing horses. And then all of a sudden the social media changed. And I was like, wow, holy cannoli. So,
yeah, it was
you get that diagnosis, you have to share that with your family. And then how quickly are you able to get treatment? What happens after that?
Right. So, we decided, because it's a rare cancer, we decided to reach out to Dana-Farber. And that is not in any way to say that the providers at Rhode Island Hospital or Women and Infants or anywhere in Rhode Island couldn't handle something like this. Mm-hmm. I don't in any way mean to imply that, but we were pretty scared. And we were very interested in and knew that Dana-Farber is world renowned for their work. So we found out the imaging was done that led to, the obvious, you have a mass and it's very likely ovarian on a Thursday. The next morning on Friday, trying to move out of the freak out mode into, okay, what do we do next? We got on the website for Dana-Farber, and they literally have the option to ask for help. This is what we know, this is what's been done. And, please give us information at 9:00 in the morning. by 11 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours later, someone had called. We were already scheduled. I was already scheduled for Tuesday to go up and have labs and have another image done, another CAT scan. And then on Wednesday to go back and see the provider. So literally within 2 hours,
Wow.
I was already set up with evaluation on one day and to see the provider the next day.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. And
So it took weeks to get the diagnosis, but once you got the diagnosis, things seemed to like ramp up hyper speed.
The Dana-Farber connection went amazingly quickly. I will say I also reached out to a provider at Rhode Island Hospital, and I had already been to Boston, seen the provider, and had my surgery scheduled another week later before I had even heard from the office at Rhode Island Hospital. So it's not that they couldn't handle it, but
Right.
but definitely it was a slower process. And I was incredibly impressed with how quickly and really even how comprehensively they set me up with care.
And so, like, I know what the country western song says when you get that kind of news. You go skydiving and you go bull riding. But, like, what is the reality day to day when, like, you leave the doctor's office on Thursday? Like, it seems to me like it would feel like a lifetime to even get to Tuesday before you're seen by a doctor. Like, how do you sit with that, like, for your own mental health? How do you keep it together and not just like lose it? Or did you lose it?
So it's really interesting because it was definitely happening to me, but this is happening to my family too. So I have a husband who's, incredibly supportive. I have 2 adult daughters, and of course we told them right away what we knew. And this has been an interesting thing on social media, that I have found a whole cancer community of people who are going through this and who ask questions of each other and give each other support, which has been great. And this was an interesting thing that we discussed. It's one thing that I'm going through it, but now they're going through it too, right? So I could see how upset my husband was, and which it's a kind of an interesting thing, right? The reality to me, I know I have cancer, and that is really scary, but I see the fear in his face. I hear my kids, my daughters, they're not kids, but, I see how upsetting it is to them. And, my girls have said to me, that isn't your problem. I'm like, oh yeah, but see, it is, they want to say, no, you can't worry about us. And I'm like, how can I not worry about you? I've worried about you since the day you came into the world, right? So, and even for my husband, I'm so worried about how this is upsetting, and that it's a very real thing that caregivers are at risk for their own health, right? So now I'm not just carrying my diagnosis. In fact, I could kind of like move my diagnosis over, and my worry for my family and even my extended family, my siblings, my mom, who's going to tell my mom, right? Because she's 85 years old. She's had cancer too, So it was really interesting how it became an even bigger thing than just whatever's happening to me. Sure, that's scary, but how are we communicating this, and how are we helping other people handle it? And again, my family kept trying to say, that's not for you to worry about. I'm like, there's no possible way that I can separate that from my own experience. And in fact, that was even arguably a harder thing to deal with, because I can't protect everyone from this thing that's happening, right? I can't hold off. And in fact, we have friends who we watched this happen where the husband was diagnosed and they decided not to tell their fairly adult children. And my husband and I immediately said, oh my gosh, I think our kids would kill us. I mean, they would be so angry if something like this was going on and we didn't tell them. So, we're firm believers in let's get the information out and get everybody in the process of dealing with this. But it's really hard. That part of it alone is a difficult thing. And especially, other people have things going on in their life. I feel like I'm piling on, I'm adding burden to other people. So it's very much a part of the reality of not just what you're going through, but how you see and you impart this to other people.
I think what you've said is so incredibly important because so often the medical community looks at the individual and the disease process and not all of the other parts of the person's life and how it impacts all those other things, because you didn't stop being a mom who doesn't want her daughters to be upset just because the doctor told you you have ovarian cancer. You didn't stop being a wife who, wants her spouse to be happy. And now it's all of that at the same time as holy cannoli, like what is happening?
Right.
So it is all of those pieces. Just a little side note. I have a master's in gerontology, which is the biological, psychological, and social aspects of aging. And it's part of how I see people when these kinds of things happen, is that it is not you are someone who has cancer and you live in that box, but you're a mom, you're an employee, you're a wife, you're a friend, you're a daughter, you are all of those things. It is trying to figure out like, oh man, like how am I doing Thanksgiving dinner or, things like that. And looking at that as part of the whole package. So we're at 18 minutes, but I want to keep going if that's okay with you, because I'm curious to know, okay, you get to Dana-Farber and they recommend treatment that's appropriate for you. What does that look like for you? Like, how did treatment go? Did it mean like, oh my gosh, you're rushing in for surgery right away? Or how does that look? And you're also lucky that you have the transportation to get up there and that kind of support system.
100%. I could not have traveled this path. I mean, of course, I could have gotten through it, but my family made it so much easier in really being willing and insisting on supporting and helping. And I think I mentioned in the last time we met, this is the second time I've had cancer. Hardly fair. I think I'm a little oversampled with with the cancer diagnosis, but back in 10 years ago, I had breast cancer, and I was again very well supported, partly because one of my husband's colleagues from training does reconstruction at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. And again, my husband then put everything aside and drove me to New York for treatment, which was just amazing. And they did well. So the diagnosis at Dana-Farber, it was a little weird because I had been on a medication for something completely different, just literally a skin rash from something. So I had been put on steroids, and the steroids actually probably are part of the reason why I was still so active right up until I got diagnosed, because the steroids, if you've ever had a course of steroids,
it suppressed your immune system so you didn't feel unwell.
They suppress your immune system, but they also make you feel like Superman, like you're going to clean your whole house in an hour and a half, or they give you this burst of what feels like superhuman energy. And I had come down and was definitely feeling a lot more fatigued, and was definitely starting to feel really, really tired. But because of the steroids, the surgeon that I saw, who explained the whole thing, what I had, I'm going to tell you the funniest, just as an aside, thing that was most impressive to me is she explained this, and she drew on a piece of paper all of the anatomy in the abdomen and pelvis and showed me what the tumor looks like and where it was, which was pretty remarkable and kind of amazing. But the thing that really cracked me up, looking at, I was so impressed that she's doing this upside down. And I said, that's really amazing, which of course my husband said, she draws that like every day of her life. So, this is not her first time explaining this to somebody, but I was so impressed at her, literally physically showing me what it looks like. And yet what she said was, because I'd been on these steroids, she needed to put off my surgery, because the steroids, while they're healing some things, getting rid of the tumor, they make healing really difficult. And so she said, I don't want to operate until, so she put it off several weeks, which was a bit scary. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I wanted it. Could we go tomorrow? Could I go and I want this thing out now that I know there's, this evil tumor lurking in my belly. I want it out as soon as possible. So that was hard to wait. And
I
again,
think that's a pretty common reaction too when someone gets a cancer diagnosis, is get it out now.
I want it out. Right. Exactly. For me, for sure. I'm like, what can we do? But she was pretty adamant. We need to wait. And I will say, because my work life was fairly complex, I'm involved in a lot of different projects. I was director of undergrad studies at the time. This is August, when we're just getting ready to have all the students come back. I needed that time to pull myself out of all of these obligations and find other people, either find other people to take them, or just say, I'm out. I'm going to be leaving on medical leave, and I don't know when I'm coming back. So, I really need other people. So in a way,
how was that? To do that outreach and to disclose such a personal medical situation.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it is exactly that. I mean, you're really disclosing the idea that I don't really need to share what, exactly is going on with me. This is the world of public health, where it becomes more real, I think, and understandable to everyone involved if they know exactly what's happening. If I was vague about it and said, I have a diagnosis, I don't know when I'll be back, but not telling everyone, I'm not sure how the curiosity would, what I could say about it, but saying I have an ovarian tumor, I'm going to be having surgery followed by other treatments, and I don't know how long I'm going to be out. It was terrifying, but in a way I felt relieved to be able to hand things off and say, I can't. And to be honest with you, I was getting so weak, and I was so exhausted. So the other side of this that we haven't really discussed is, after my surgery, within a couple of days, I was diagnosed with another really rare condition that was completely unexpected, but explains some of the weakness that I was having. And that is, I have myositis, which is an autoimmune neuromuscular disorder. I had never heard of it before. I'm like, I worked in the hospital for some time. My husband had never heard of it before. We're looking it up, trying to figure out what this is. But it essentially made the big muscles in my body, and some of the small ones, not work. So instead of feeling stronger after surgery and getting out there and doing the walking that they're telling me to do, I'm trying to be a good doobie and I want to be, a strong patient. I was getting weaker and having a hard time sitting up. Without even knowing it, I was having a hard time swallowing. I got pneumonia from aspirating because I didn't know I was having trouble swallowing, and my husband's worried because I've lost weight. So he's trying to feed me too. He's trying to be helpful with feeding. And so
is that diagnosis common to individuals who have ovarian cancer, or you're just like keep drawing a really bad hand here?
I know. My husband said it's like you've been struck by lightning twice at the same time. They're both rare. So
okay.
According to the neurologist,
I hope you play Powerball as rare as things are happening for you.
Well, right. I would love to have known that, right? That would have been the time. According to the neurologist, the tumor was not related, but it's really hard to say. I had been on a statin medication for cholesterol lowering, and they believed that the statin was the cause of the myositis. My husband believes, and I agree with this line of thinking, it's very hard to imagine that the tumor or tumor development didn't have anything to do with it, that maybe they weren't influenced by some of the same autoimmune causes or interacted with one another, but both are so rare. There's no data on people having this because, there are like 5 of us ever, or, it's just so rare that it's hard to really study something like that. So it also went on to be even more crazy in my experience, in that they started treating me. Literally, I got moved from the cancer unit to the neuro unit, and they started treating me for the myositis with an IV immunoglobulin.
And that myositis, that was, you were experiencing that when you were still in the hospital. So you had the surgery to get the
I was experiencing it even before, but I didn't know that was part of the issue with the weakness. For example, the morning of my surgery, I was showering, and they have you shower and clean yourself with particular kind of soap and so forth before you go in. And I literally asked my husband that morning, can you help me wash my hair because I can't reach my hands above my head? And he was like, that's weird. That is not something that should be related to ovarian cancer. That you literally, I could not reach my hands. Now you see, I'm doing it now. I'm much better with treatment, but we did not know that, and didn't even know to tell anybody that, until the weakness continued and got much worse after surgery. And again, I'm saying, I was in a horse show 2 weeks ago. How is this even possible? But literally,
and that's the crazy thing, is that I was watching this unfold on social. You've been, very generous at sharing your story. And I'm like, wait a minute, what wasn't she just getting ribbons? Doing something that she always wanted to do. And now what? Okay. And so you have that surgery, and then they're trying to get you up to walk. And that's when you're finding out about the myositis.
The myositis. Okay. But here's where it gets even more complicated, which happens sometimes. They started treating me for the myositis, and the next morning, literally hours after they finished the first infusion, I had a stroke. So, it's like, could we stop with the diagnoses? Could we stop with new things happening? I was awake and saw it happening, and literally, as soon I couldn't find my hand in the in like the sheets and stuff on the bed. I couldn't find my left hand. My right hand is like looking around the bed. And then I tried to speak, and I sounded like Marlon Brando. I had very garbled speech. And that's where, but extreme aphasia, like just completely garbled. And I pushed this is right in the middle of, a million things going on in the hospital, probably like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I just had a shower, a glorious shower. I was so excited to have finally had a shower, and then trying to get a hold of somebody. And then I finally just yelled at them, that have one of the nurses come in, and the neuro team was right outside the door. I referred to them as the nerd herd because they're super smart, incredibly smart, and incredibly helpful team. They just happened to be literally right outside my door when I yelled, and the lead guy was amazing, and he said, "We think you're having a stroke," which I already knew that. I mean, at that point, I'm like, I think I'm having a stroke, but he said, "We think you're having a stroke. You're on the neurology ward at Brigham and Women's Hospital. If you're going to have a stroke, this is the best place to be. We're going to take care of you," So, okay. He's like, "We're here." I heard one of the nurses say, "Should we call for a code stroke?" He said, "No, because they're going to call for us and we're already here. So there's nothing to be, we're doing it. We're doing everything we need to do." So it did get complicated because they want to send you for potentially, the rapid clot buster. I just had big surgery, could not have anything like that. I couldn't even put me on medication to decrease the risk of clot forming. They had to be incredibly careful with that because I had this giant incision from my tumor removal. So I became this insanely complicated patient.
Real fast.
Was that?
Real fast. You got complicated real fast.
I mean, as if the cancer wasn't enough, right? That was enough. But then finding out the rest of it. But I'm going to tell you, the myositis and the stroke at that point meant that I'm laying in the bed. I could not lift at that point my arms off the side of the bed. I would have to say, "Could somebody scratch my left eyebrow?" I couldn't touch my face. I couldn't roll over. It was amazing. It was almost like being a quadriplegic. I couldn't lift my head off the bed.
Yep.
So it was really extreme. It was really extreme.